The chains rattled against the metal floor as Velcor dragged another piece of twisted wreckage toward the sorting pile. His hands were shaking again. They always shook when the neural inhibitors kicked in at full strength. The Caltherian overseers said it was because he was defective. Broken. A mistake in their otherwise perfect genetic line. Velcor had stopped arguing about it years ago. What was the point? His own parents had handed him over to the labor camps without a second thought. In Caltherian society, if you couldn't bond with their living ships, if your mind didn't sync with their biotechnology, you were worthless. And Velcor's mind had never synced with anything they valued. The industrial moon of Rykos 9 was where the Empire sent all its mistakes. Defective youth, political prisoners, conquered species who'd resisted too much. Everyone here wore chains. Everyone here sorted through the toxic wreckage of crashed ships and broken machinery until their bodies gave out. Most lasted 3 years. Velcor had survived 5. He picked up a piece of hull plating, running his oversized fingers along the edge. The metal told him a story. The fracture pattern showed thermal stress at the molecular level. The discoloration indicated exposure to specific radiation. The way it had torn suggested the impact angle and velocity. Within seconds, Velcor knew exactly how this ship had died. Not that anyone cared what he knew. Move faster, defect. The overseer's voice crackled through the translator device. A shock of pain ran through Velcor's chains, making him stumble. The neural inhibitors weren't just restraints. They actively suppressed his thoughts, made his mind foggy and slow, kept him in constant low-level pain. The Caltherians said it was for safety. Velcor suspected it was just cruelty. He forced himself to move quicker, tossing the hull plating onto the designated pile. Around him, dozens of other prisoners worked in silence. Speaking wasn't forbidden, but nobody had the energy. The chains saw to that. That's when the new human arrived. Velcor had seen humans before. They'd started showing up about a year ago, part of some debt arrangement between their colonies and the Caltherian Empire. Most kept their heads down and worked their contracts. Smart ones didn't make trouble. This one looked like trouble. Jake Morrison stood at the entrance to the scrapyard, taking in the scene with sharp blue eyes. He was tall for a human, built solid from years of manual labor. His clothes were stained with engine grease and his hands had the calluses of someone who actually knew how to fix things. He carried a worn toolkit that looked older than Velcor. The human walked past rows of chained prisoners without flinching. He'd clearly seen worse. But when he reached Velcor's section, he stopped. Just stood there watching. Velcor tried to ignore him. Attention was never good in places like this. He focused on the next piece of wreckage, a twisted support beam that had failed under compression. The crystalline structure of the metal had been compromised before the crash. Manufacturing defect. Probably caused the whole accident. You're reading that metal. The human's voice was quiet, almost to himself. Velcor's hands froze. Nobody had ever noticed before. He glanced up nervously. The human was staring at him with an expression Velcor couldn't identify. Not disgust. Not pity. Something else. Those hands aren't clumsy, Jake continued, moving closer. You're analyzing stress fractures. Understanding failure points. That's engineering intuition. That's skill. Velcor quickly looked away. I am defective. My people say so. Your people are blind. Jake knelt down beside the wreckage pile. I've been doing salvage work for 15 years. It takes me instruments and time to see what you just saw in 3 seconds. That's not defective. That's genius. Before Velcor could respond, a Caltherian overseer stormed over. The insectoid alien towered over both of them, its mandibles clicking in agitation. It raised an energy prod and jabbed it toward Velcor. Defect is daydreaming. Defect must work faster. Jake stood up, putting himself between the prod and Velcor. He's working just fine. Better than fine. Back off. The overseer's translator hummed. You defend defective property, human? This violates your contract. I defend a kid doing complex engineering analysis with his bare hands while you're too stupid to notice. That's not a contract violation. That's me pointing out facts. The scrapyard had gone quiet. Every prisoner was watching now. Nobody talked back to overseers. Nobody. The Caltherian's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of anger. You will regret this choice, human? Probably, Jake agreed. But I'll regret it unchained. He was wrong about that part. By evening, Jake Morrison wore the same neural inhibitor chains as every other prisoner. But as they dragged him past Velcor's workstation, the human caught his eye and smiled. Don't worry, kid. I've gotten out of worse situations. And something tells me you and I are going to make a hell of a team. Velcor watched the human disappear into the prisoner barracks, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt something he'd forgotten existed. Oh. They threw Jake into the waste processing sector. It was the worst assignment in the scrapyard, where the most toxic wreckage ended up. The kind of materials that leaked radiation and unknown chemicals. The kind of place where prisoners were sent to die quietly. Velcor was already there when Jake arrived. The alien boy looked up from his workstation with surprise, then quickly looked away. Getting attached to anyone here was dangerous. People didn't last long in waste processing. But Jake wasn't like most people. So, the human said, settling down on a pile of scrap metal like it was a comfortable chair. Want to tell me what you really see when you look at this junk? Velcor kept his eyes down. The neural chains around his wrists pulsed with dull pain, making it hard to think clearly. I see wreckage. Same as everyone. Liar. There was no anger in Jake's voice, just certainty. I watched you for 20 minutes before I opened my mouth yesterday. You weren't just sorting. You were analyzing. Teaching yourself. So let's try this again. What do you really see? Something in the human's tone made Velcor look up. Jake's eyes were serious but kind. Not mocking. Not cruel. Just genuinely curious. When was the last time anyone had been curious about what Velcor thought? The alien boy picked up a piece of engine casing. His oversized hands traced the metal surface gently. This failed at approximately 847 degrees. The melting pattern shows rotational stress. The microfractures indicate acid exposure over time, probably from improper coolant mixture. The ship this came from had maintenance problems for at least 6 months before it crashed. Jake stared at him. You got all that from touching it? I see the patterns. The way things break tells you how they were used, how they were made, what went wrong. Velcor's voice grew stronger despite the pain from his chains. Metal remembers everything. You just have to know how to read it. That's incredible. Jake moved closer, examining the casing himself. That's pure engineering intuition. Do you know how rare that is? Most engineers need years of training and expensive equipment to do what you just did with your hands. Velcor felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Pride maybe. Or just the strange sensation of being seen as something other than defective. My people say my brain is broken. I cannot bond with biotechnology. I cannot interface with living systems. My mind works wrong. Your mind works different. Jake pulled out a small tool from his pocket, somehow missed during the search when they chained him. Different isn't wrong. Humans learned that lesson the hard way. Some of our greatest inventors thought differently than everyone else. They saw patterns nobody else could see. They solved problems in ways that seemed crazy until they worked. Over the next hour, Jake sketched designs in the dirt with a piece of wire. Basic mechanical principles. Leverage. Fulcrums. Force distribution. Things that had nothing to do with organic technology or bioneural interfacing. Pure physics and mathematics. Velcor absorbed it all like a desert absorbing rain. His mind, even dampened by the neural chains, grasped concepts instantly. He started adding to Jake's sketches, improving designs, finding elegant solutions to problems the human posed. Okay, that's just showing off now, Jake said with a grin. You just solved a 3-body problem in your head while wearing inhibitor chains. Kid, you're not defective. You're brilliant. The words hit Velcor harder than any overseer's prod. Brilliant. Nobody had ever called him that. He felt tears threatening and forced them back. Showing emotion was dangerous here. But then Jake's expression changed. He was staring at the neural chains on Velcor's wrists and neck. The human reached out carefully, examining the devices without touching them. His engineer's eye studied the construction, the energy flow, the connection points. These things are torture devices, Jake said quietly. They're not just restraining you. They're actively suppressing your cognitive functions. Keeping you in pain. Foggy. Slow. They say it is for safety. To prevent defects from harming themselves or others. That's garbage. Jake's voice was hard now. This is about control. About keeping you broken so you can't realize how capable you actually are. He looked up, meeting Velcor's eyes. How long have you been wearing these? 5 years. Since I was declared defective. Jake's jaw clenched. Then his expression shifted into something determined. Something almost scary in its intensity. We're going to get these off you. That is impossible. The locks are encrypted. The power source is shielded. Even if we could disable one, the overseers would notice immediately. I didn't say it would be easy. I said we're going to do it. Jake pulled out his small tool again, along with a thin piece of wire he'd hidden in his boot. I've cracked secured systems before. Military-grade encryption on colony ship drives. Security protocols on corporate mining equipment. These chains? They're just another puzzle. Velcor felt that dangerous hope rising again. If we are caught, they will kill us. If we don't try, these chains will kill you anyway. Just slower. Jake positioned himself to block the view from the nearest security camera. Now stay still. This is going to take some time, and we can only work during sleep cycles when monitoring is lighter. But I promise you something, kid. I'm going to free that brilliant mind of yours, one chain at a time. For the next 3 weeks, Jake worked during the darkest hours. His hands moved with careful precision, mapping the neural chain circuitry, finding weaknesses, exploiting design flaws. Velcor helped, his understanding of energy flow patterns guiding Jake's efforts. Finally, on the 23rd night, something clicked. The first chain, the one on Velcor's left wrist, went dark. The constant pressure in his mind eased. The fog lifted slightly. Velcor gasped. His thoughts suddenly moved faster. Clear. Sharper. He looked at the wreckage around them and saw things he'd been missing. Patterns within patterns. Possibilities. How do you feel? Jake whispered. I can think. Really think. It is like I have been living underwater and someone just pulled me to the surface. Velcor's voice shook with emotion. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You've still got 4 more chains. Jake carefully hid his tools. But now we know it works. We can do this. Velcor nodded, his newly cleared mind already racing. If one chain made this much difference, what would he be capable of with all of them gone? And more importantly, if they could free him, could they free others? The possibilities were endless. And for the first time since he'd been declared defective, Velcor allowed himself to imagine a future beyond these chains. With the first chain removed, Velcor's transformation was remarkable. Jake watched in amazement as the alien boy's hands stopped trembling completely. His movements became precise and confident. Tasks that used to take him hours now took minutes. The kid wasn't just working faster. He was working smarter. Velcor began solving problems that Jake himself found challenging. A pressure valve that had stumped the human for 2 days? Velcor fixed it in 20 minutes by understanding the crystalline structure of the failed component and finding a workaround. A power distribution puzzle that seemed impossible? The kid mapped the entire energy flow in his head and found an elegant solution. You're scary good at this, Jake said one afternoon, watching Velcor repair a damaged control panel using nothing but scrap parts. Like, genuinely frightening. I've worked with trained engineers who couldn't do what you just did. Velcor looked up, his large eyes bright with something Jake recognized as joy. Pure, simple joy at being able to use his mind fully. It feels like I can finally see clearly. Like someone cleaned a dirty window I did not even know was blocking my view. But their success created a new problem. The overseers noticed. Production numbers from their sector had jumped significantly. Velcor was completing assignments 30% faster than before. Quality had improved. Equipment failures had decreased. In a place where everyone was expected to barely survive, excellence stood out like a beacon. The Caltherian supervisor arrived during the afternoon shift, flanked by 2 guards. The insectoid alien's mandibles clicked as it studied Velcor with suspicious eyes. Defect productivity has increased. Explain this change. Jake's heart pounded, but he kept his expression casual. This was the moment he'd been preparing for. That's on me. I've been giving him performance enhancers. The supervisor's head tilted. Explain. Stimulants. Stuff I smuggled in from my last job. Jake shrugged like it was no big deal. Figured if I could make the kid work faster, my own workload would be easier. Basic human laziness, really? It was exactly the kind of selfish logic the Caltherians would believe. They'd spent years studying human behavior and knew that humans often looked for shortcuts. The lie fit their expectations perfectly. You administered substances to Empire property without authorization. This violates regulations. Yeah, probably. But look at the results. Your numbers are up, the work's getting done faster, and everybody wins. I'd say that's worth a little rule bending. The supervisor considered this. Its mandibles clicked in a pattern Jake had learned meant calculation. The Caltherians valued efficiency above almost everything else. If Jake's story meant better productivity, they might overlook the violation. But they wouldn't overlook it completely. You will be disciplined for unauthorized actions. However, improved productivity is noted. The supervisor gestured to its guards. Chain the human properly. Heavy restraints. If chemical enhancement of defective property improves results, we will continue this method under proper supervision. Jake's stomach dropped as the guards moved toward him. He'd known this might happen, but knowing didn't make it easier. Heavy restraints meant neural inhibitors worse than what Velcor wore. Meant constant pain. Meant his mind would be trapped in fog while his body screamed. Velcor started to stand to protest, but Jake caught his eye and shook his head slightly. Don't waste this. The chains were heavier than Jake expected. 3 of them locked around both wrists and his neck. The moment they activated, pain exploded through his nervous system. His vision blurred. His thoughts scattered like frightened birds. Every nerve ending felt like it was on fire. He heard Velcor cry out in distress but couldn't form words to respond. The world became a haze of agony and confusion. Time lost meaning after that. Jake drifted in and out of awareness, his mind struggling against the neural suppression. Sometimes he'd surface enough to realize he was still working, his hands moving on autopilot. Other times everything was just white noise and pain. But in the few clear moments he had, he'd see Velcor. The alien boy worked with desperate intensity now. Not just completing assigned tasks but doing something else. Something the overseers couldn't see because they'd never learned to recognize genius when it didn't fit their expectations. Velcor was building something. Moving pieces of scrap into specific positions. Creating patterns across the entire work sector that looked random but weren't. Jake's engineer brain, even dulled by the chains, recognized the beginnings of a massive design. Something ambitious. Something impossible. One night, during a brief moment of clarity, Jake felt someone working on his chains. He forced his eyes open to find Velcor there, using the same techniques Jake had taught him. But the kid's hands were shaking. Tears ran down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "Not your fault," Jake managed through the pain. His voice sounded broken even to his own ears. "Keep going. Keep working on it." "On what? On freeing you? I do not know if I can. These chains are more complex than mine were." "Not chains. Your plan." Jake forced the words out. "I see it. The scrap. The pattern. You are building something. Something big." Velcor stared at him in shock. "You can see that? Even with the inhibitors. Can't stop, engineer brain. Keep building. Whatever it is. I trust you." The alien boy's expression hardened with determination. "Then I will finish it. But Jake, I need all my chains removed first. What I am planning requires my full cognitive ability. No restrictions. No limitations." Jake understood what Velcor was really saying. The kid wasn't just planning their escape anymore. He was planning something bigger. Something that would need every ounce of his brilliant, unrestricted mind. "How many chains left?" 3. "The same number you wear now." Jake tried to smile through the pain. "Then we match. Remove yours first. I will survive. I will not leave you like this. We do this together. Kid, whatever you are planning, needs you at full power. Remove your chains. Build your thing. Then you can come back for me. Promise?" Velcor hesitated, clearly torn. Then he nodded. "I promise. But Jake, what I am building is not just an escape plan. It is bigger than that." "Good," Jake whispered. "Show these people what happens when humans teach genius how to be free." Over the next week, Velcor worked during every sleep cycle to remove his remaining chains. Jake drifted through a haze of pain, occasionally surfacing to watch the kid's progress. The scrap pile patterns grew more complex, more purposeful. Other prisoners began to notice but didn't understand what they were seeing. The overseers definitely didn't understand. To them, it just looked like the defective alien was arranging garbage. They were blind to the mathematical precision. Blind to the physics calculations built into every placement. Blind to the fact that Velcor was constructing the most elegant kinetic chain reaction system Jake had ever seen. On the 7th night, the final chain came off Velcor's neck. The change was immediate and stunning. The alien boy straightened up, his eyes blazing with clarity and purpose. His mind, finally free of all restrictions, operated at full capacity. And what Jake saw in those eyes was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Pure, unleashed genius with a score to settle. "Jake," Velcor whispered, "there are 300 prisoners here. All different species. All called defective by their own people. All chained and broken and told they are worthless." Jake managed a nod, understanding where this was going. "You taught me that human engineering is about finding elegant solutions to impossible problems. I found one. But it requires precise timing, perfect calculations, and complete confidence in the design." Velcor met his eyes. "I'm going to free everyone. And I am going to do it in a way that proves defective is just another word for different. Are you with me?" Through the pain and the fog, Jake smiled. Always, kid. Show them what you can do. For the next week, Velcor worked like a machine with a purpose. But Jake knew better. The kid wasn't working like a machine. He was working like an artist creating a masterpiece. Every piece of scrap placed with mathematical precision. Every calculation verified 3 times in his head. Every variable accounted for. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness, the heavy chains keeping his mind wrapped in fog and pain. But in his clearer moments, he watched Velcor move through the scrapyard like a conductor preparing an orchestra. The alien boy had mapped every system in the entire facility. Power grids, structural supports, magnetic lock systems, emergency protocols, life support backups, everything. And he'd found the single point of failure that could bring it all down in exactly the right way. Other prisoners started noticing too. A Thurian female with twisted legs watched Velcor arrange debris near her station. "What are you doing, small one?" "Building hope," Velcor replied quietly. "When the time comes, move to the north wall and stay low. Tell the others near you to do the same." She didn't understand, but something in his voice made her nod. A Corvan male, missing 3 of his 6 arms, saw the patterns taking shape. His species had natural mathematical ability, even the ones declared defective. His eyes widened. "That is a cascade design. A kinetic amplification system. You see it?" Velcor's voice held relief. "Then help me. When the sequence starts, guide your section toward the emergency exits. Keep everyone calm. Can you do that?" The Corvan stared at him. "You are just a child. A defective one at that. A human once told me that defective just means different. And different people see solutions others miss." Velcor met his eyes steadily. "I can free everyone here. But I need help keeping people safe during the chaos. Will you help?" Something shifted in the Corvan's expression. Hope maybe. Or just the desperate desire to believe freedom was possible. "I will help." Word spread quietly through the prisoner network. Not the full plan because that would be too dangerous. Just small instructions. When things start happening, move here. Stay low there. Trust the defective Caltherian boy who'd been chained longer than most of them. Jake watched it all unfold through his pain-fogged awareness. The kid was a natural leader. Who would have thought? The alien boy his own people had declared worthless was coordinating hundreds of prisoners in a plan so complex it made Jake's head spin even without the neural chains. But then the overseers noticed. Really noticed. A supervisor arrived with 4 guards, mandibles clicking in agitation. They'd finally realized the scrap piles weren't random. The patterns were too precise, too purposeful. And Velcor was at the center of all of it. Defect has been constructing unauthorized structures. This violates facility regulations. Punishment will be immediate termination. The guards raised their energy weapons, aiming at Velcor. Around the scrapyard, prisoners froze in horror. Jake tried to move, tried to do something, but his body wouldn't respond. The chains had drained too much from him. But Velcor didn't run. Didn't panic. He just smiled. "You are 3 seconds too late." His hand pressed against a specific piece of metal. A piece Jake suddenly recognized as a makeshift trigger mechanism built from salvaged components. Brilliant. Elegant. Perfectly hidden in plain sight. The supervisor's translator crackled with confusion. "What have you done, Defect?" "I solved an impossible problem. You should evacuate now. You have approximately 45 seconds. Then everything happened at once. The first explosion was small, controlled, perfectly placed at a structural weak point Velcor had identified. It triggered a chain reaction. Support beams failed in sequence, not catastrophically but precisely. Calculated. Like dominoes falling in a pattern designed by a genius. Magnetic lock systems overloaded next. Every prison chain in the facility suddenly went dead. 300 prisoners felt their restraints fall away simultaneously. The neural inhibitors stopped. The pain stopped. Minds that had been suppressed for years suddenly blazed to life. Jake gasped as his own chains released. The fog in his head cleared instantly. The pain vanished. He could think again. Move again. He looked up to see Velcor running toward him. "Can you stand?" the alien boy asked urgently. Yeah, I think so." Jake pulled himself up, his legs shaky but functional. Around them, the facility was coming apart in the most controlled destruction he'd ever witnessed. "Kid, this is insane. This is beautiful. This is impossible. You taught me humans specialize in impossible." Velcor grabbed Jake's arm, steadying him. "Now we move. North wall like I planned." 30 seconds before the main sequence. They ran. Around them, Other prisoners followed Velkor's instructions. The Corvan male was herding people toward exits. The Thurian female was helping others who couldn't move quickly. Every species that had been called defective was now working together with surprising coordination. The Caltherian guards tried to stop them, but they were outnumbered and confused. Their facility was collapsing according to a pattern they couldn't understand. Systems were failing in ways that shouldn't be possible. It was chaos, but controlled chaos. Engineered chaos. Jake and Velkor reached the north wall just as the main sequence activated. Power conduits throughout the facility overloaded in a cascading wave. Not random destruction. Targeted, precise energy releases that opened emergency doors, disabled weapon systems, and shut down security protocols. But life support stayed intact. Emergency lighting activated. Breathable atmosphere maintained. Velkor had calculated everything to destroy the prison while keeping the prisoners alive. How did you do this? Jake asked in amazement. How did you calculate all of this in your head? I had time. I had motivation. And I had a human teacher who showed me that my different way of thinking was actually a strength. Velkor's eyes were bright. You gave me more than freedom from chains, Jake. You gave me confidence that my mind works exactly as it should. The facility shook with another controlled explosion. Structural supports failed on the guard towers. The Overseer Command Center lost power. Weapon systems went offline. In less than 5 minutes, Velkor had transformed a prison into a disaster zone that only the prisoners knew how to navigate. The freed prisoners overwhelmed the remaining guards through sheer numbers and coordinated effort. Not through violence but through Velkor's planning. Every person had a role. Every action was part of the larger design. It was like watching a machine operate, except the machine was made of living beings all working toward the same goal. Freedom. Jake watched it all unfold and felt something he rarely experienced. Pure, genuine awe at what this young alien had accomplished. The kid his own people had called defective had just orchestrated the most elegant prison break Jake had ever seen or heard of. A Caltherian supervisor, trapped under fallen debris but uninjured, stared at Velkor in disbelief. Impossible. Defects cannot plan like this. Cannot calculate like this. Cannot lead like this. Velkor knelt down beside the supervisor, his expression calm. That is your first mistake. Assuming defective means incapable. Your second mistake was chaining people and expecting them not to dream of freedom. Your third mistake was underestimating what happens when a human teaches someone to believe in themselves. He stood up and activated an emergency beacon. Human colony ships will arrive soon. Your empire will have to explain why a facility full of so-called defects is now free and your security systems are in pieces. I suggest you think carefully about what that says about your definition of defective. Jake put a hand on Velkor's shoulder. You did it, kid. You actually did it. We did it, Velkor corrected. You cut my chains. I cut everyone else's. That is what humans call teamwork, yes. Jake laughed, feeling lighter than he had in months. Yeah, kid. That's exactly what we call it. The human colony ships arrived 6 hours later, responding to the emergency beacon Velkor had activated. What they found shocked everyone on board. The prison facility on Rykos 9 was still standing, but barely. Structural damage was extensive but somehow surgical. Life support systems functioned perfectly. 300 freed prisoners had organized themselves into work crews, already beginning to repair and retrofit the damaged sections. And at the center of it all was a young Caltherian alien directing operations like he'd been doing it his whole life. Commander Rebecca Hayes stepped off the landing shuttle and stopped in her tracks. She'd been expecting chaos. Injured prisoners. Maybe bodies. Instead she saw order. Purpose. People working together across species lines in ways that shouldn't be possible. Jake limped over to meet her, still recovering from his time in heavy chains. Commander Hayes. Good to see you. Morrison? Jake Morrison? Rebecca stared at him. You were reported missing 3 months ago. We thought the Caltherians had executed you for that contract dispute. They did something worse. They made me a prisoner. But that turned out to be the best thing that could have happened. Jake gestured toward Velkor. Because it let me meet him. Rebecca followed his gaze to the alien boy coordinating a repair crew. She watched for a moment, her tactical mind recognizing genius when she saw it. He did this? The kid. That kid just out-engineered an entire Caltherian security facility, freed 300 prisoners, and did it all while keeping casualties to 0. Both prisoners and guards are alive. Jake's voice held unmistakable pride. His own people called him defective, chained him, tortured him. And he still chose not to kill anyone during the escape. Rebecca's eyes widened. 0 casualties? In a prison break involving 300 people? Velcor said that proving you're not defective doesn't require becoming a monster. Just requires showing what you're actually capable of. Jake smiled. The kid's got principles to match his brain. Over the next hour, Rebecca toured the facility with Jake and Velcor. The alien boy explained his design with casual brilliance, pointing out calculations and structural considerations that made Rebecca's head spin. She'd been a military engineer for 20 years. This kid was operating on a level she'd rarely encountered. But then the Caltherian delegation arrived. 3 Imperial ships, led by a high-ranking official whose translator identified him as Magistrate Corthen. The insectoid alien's mandibles clicked with barely contained anger. The prisoners will be returned immediately. They are property of the Caltherian Empire. This interference violates treaty protocols. Rebecca faced him calmly. These people aren't property. They're sentient beings who were illegally detained and tortured. They are defective members of various species. Their own societies designated them as such. We merely provided labor opportunities. Labor opportunities? Jake's voice was hard. You chain kids. Put neural inhibitors on them that caused constant pain. Worked them until they died. That's not labor. That's slavery and torture. The magistrate's attention fixed on Velcor. That one is Caltherian property. Genetic defect, registered and documented. He must be returned for processing. Processing? Rebecca's hand moved to her sidearm. What kind of processing? Defects who demonstrate dangerous behavior are terminated. This one destroyed Imperial property and organized an uprising. He is now classified as hostile. Velcor stepped forward before anyone could stop him. His voice was steady, unafraid. I am not defective. I am different. My brain works with mathematics and physics instead of bioneural interfacing. That does not make me broken. That makes me an engineer. You cannot interface with our technology. Therefore you are useless to Caltherian society. Then Caltherian society is useless to me. Velcor met the magistrate's eyes without flinching. I choose to leave. And I choose to take everyone here with me who wants a chance to prove their worth. The magistrate's mandibles clicked faster. You have no choice. You are property. No. Rebecca's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He's not. As of right now, I'm offering Velcor and any other prisoner here asylum and citizenship in the Human Colonial Alliance. They're under our protection. You cannot do this. Treaties forbid interference with internal species matters. Then maybe you shouldn't have accepted humans as contract labor. Because the moment you put Jake Morrison in chains, this became our matter too. Rebecca's smile was cold. And we take a very dim view of people who torture kids. Any kids. Any species. The standoff lasted for 3 tense minutes. Finally, the magistrate backed down. The Caltherian Empire valued trade with humanity too much to risk conflict over prisoners they'd already written off as worthless. But his parting words were venomous. You claim defects as your own? Then you deserve the problems they will bring. These failures will drag your society down just as they would have dragged down ours. After the Caltherians left, Rebecca turned to the freed prisoners. Anyone who wants to come with us can. We'll provide transport, medical care, and asylum. No chains. No torture. Just a chance to build a life. Every single prisoner stepped forward. The next months were transformative. Velcor received full Earth citizenship and a scholarship to New Chicago Technical Institute. Jake became his legal guardian and advocate. Together they established something unprecedented. The Defect Collective started small. Just a workshop where Velcor and a few other freed prisoners could work on projects. But word spread quickly. Beings from across the galaxy who'd been called defective by their own species started showing up. A Thurian with enhanced spatial reasoning. A Corvin who could visualize quantum states. A Vrex who understood harmonic frequencies on an intuitive level. Each one had been chained, rejected, called broken. Each one had abilities their species had failed to recognize or value. And under human guidance, each one flourished. Velcor's first major project proved what they could accomplish. He designed a hybrid ship that combined Caltherian biotechnology with human mechanical engineering. Experts said it was impossible. The two systems were incompatible. But Velcor saw what they missed. He found the bridge between organic and mechanical, creating something neither species could have built alone. The ship worked perfectly. And suddenly, the galaxy noticed. 5 years after the liberation of Rikos 9, Velcor stood in front of a lecture hall at New Chicago Technical Institute. 200 students, human and alien, waited to hear him speak. On his wrists were tattoos shaped like broken chains. Not to remember pain but to honor the person who'd freed him. Jake sat in the back row, watching with quiet pride as the kid he'd met in chains taught the next generation of engineers. My people said I was defective, Velcor began. They said my brain was broken because it worked differently than theirs. They chained me and told me I was worthless. But a human mechanic saw something they missed. He saw potential. He saw ability. He saw a person worth saving. He held up a piece of complex machinery. This is a quantum stabilizer. Every expert said it couldn't be built with current technology. But a Vrex engineer in our collective designed it because her brain processes harmonic frequencies in ways no current technology can match. She was called defective by her people. I call her brilliant. The students leaned forward, fascinated. Humans have a saying that one person's trash is another's treasure. In the Defect Collective we prove that every day. What one species calls broken, another calls innovative. What one culture rejects, another celebrates. Velcor's voice grew stronger. We are not defective. We are different. And different minds solve problems that identical minds never could. After the lecture, students crowded around with questions. Jake finally made his way through to Velcor's side. Good speech, kid. Really good. I learned from the best. Velcor smiled. You taught me that the most powerful thing anyone can do is see potential in someone everyone else has given up on. That is what humans do better than any species I have met. You do not just accept differences. You celebrate them. Jake shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just cut some chains and taught you basic engineering. You did all the hard work. You did more than that. You gave me something more valuable than freedom. Velcor touched the tattoos on his wrists. You gave me the belief that I was worth freeing. That changed everything. Around them the Defect Collective thrived. Hundreds of beings once called worthless now created innovations that changed the galaxy. They designed ships, solved equations, built machines, and proved every single day that defective was just a word used by people too limited to see past their own expectations. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that humanity had learned long ago. Everyone deserves a chance. Everyone has value. Sometimes you just need someone willing to cut the chains and let them prove it. Velcor looked at Jake, his friend and mentor, and smiled. The galaxy had called him broken. One human had called him brilliant. And that had made all the difference.